Islam Morris. That's right. Right, space east. Five on the left, two on the right. Allah, Father of the universe.
Allah, the Father of the universe.
Father of love.
Father of love.
Truth.
Peace.
Freedom.
Freedom.
And justice.
Allah
is my protector.
Allah is my protector.
My guide. My salvation.
My salvation.
By night.
By
By day. His holy prophet.
His holy prophet.
Ashe. Islam. Just read our readings to be read every meeting. The Prophet warns all Muslims, governors, ordered to read proclamation at each meeting. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical, agitating speeches while at work, in their homes, or on the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the Prophet Noble to Ali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out a divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Noble to Ali. To be proclaimed at every meeting. Islam. I am glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim that I was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens, they are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they may take charge of the situation. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that attribute to the movement and uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That is why I am calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without I, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works which I have performed in the past few years. Prophet Noble Ali. To the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam. This is the instruction from your Prophet Noble Ali. Be faithful unto your forefathers' divine and national creed, that you would be blessed for your good deeds that you sow in the flesh. Allah is the one that judges the world, and his judgment is now on, but the weak can comprehend it not. The end of time is drawing near, so says Allah to his divine prophet, I Noble Ali. And that's why many hearts have been turned to stone. Many have eyes to see and cannot see, ears to hear but cannot hear, lest they will be confounded of their sins. These are trying hours now, dear Moors, and every evil spirit is moving, and they are trying every weak mind to overthrow and drag out the true foundation that has been laid, and to cause confusion in the minds of the ones that do believe. But if you have the true love of Allah and the spirit of your forefathers, you fear not what you hear or see, but would sacrifice the utmost of your very life to protect your movement and your prophet. Watch your enemies, dear Moors. Your enemies are the ones that speak against your prophet and ridicule him to the very lowest. The ones that speak against your divine and national principles of your temples, act accordingly, and Allah would bless you for your good work. Peace, your divine prophet.
And most of us, and this also involves our earlier conversation. And I know most of you are conscious. However, we have a tendency to forget who's who, what's what, and keep this in mind. Everything in occupied society, and that must be remembered, is operated under feudal law and not under constitutional law. And I think when you start studying the problems that people have, economic and political, as far as tithing tax, things like that. They have a tendency to address these things when they become burdens, and a tendency not to pay attention to it at all in their everyday affairs, as if it arises only when there's what you call serious problems. And it actually goes on every day. It's uncomfortable, but we really have to need to remove that naivety that exists with us and put things in perspective at all times. And keep in mind, attorneys are attorners. Now, so write that down, and to get it clear with you that these things are misrepresented from the door. The other thing is to keep in mind that the people are operating in a feudal society. It's not a lawful society. It is an unlawful society of operations. It doesn't make the people wrong. It makes the condition wrong that the people are not aware that the people who are governing over them are not their government. That must be clear. It's not a matter of whether they're hostile to you openly or not, or whether you like them or don't like them openly or in secret. It's not relative. It's not relevant. The issue is to know who's who, what's what, and what is really in operation. And I think because in our everyday life efforts, we're busy living, or as you might say, going about our business, that we keep forgetting that we're under European colonial operations and occupation. And it's easy to forget that because very few people bring it up. You know what I mean? And so even when you're made aware of it, it usually doesn't dawn on most people that the operations of governing is in place to support that venue, not to support or to enforce constitutional principles which are actually put in place to keep them in check. And after many generations, that has been forgotten. And it also has not been regularly addressed. And because it has not been regularly addressed, the fundamental rules of governmental operations have been forgotten. Now, any of you, and one of the things that we want to do is to get you involved intellectually and in fact. So, as an example, can any one of you read Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States? And I want you to give them the mic. And I want you to share and analyze this. Because first thing that we want to present to you is in governing or in operations at North America, we must be clear on what a court is. And one of the things that you're going to discover, and this is back to the fundamentals of our operations, everyday operations, is that it never dawns on the average being what a court is. They allow people to say court without qualification. And there's an assumption of established rule of law that has gone unchallenged, and that has been a great danger. And so the subject matter tonight is to make that clear, without hostility, without bitterness, and without rejection, but with observation and knowledge, and for you not to forget that now and in the future. Because many of the fundamental protocols that would be just part of your everyday living would automatically be in your thought process if this is remembered. So please read, for the record, Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States at North America.
Islam. Article 3. Section 1. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. Section 2. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, treaties made or which shall be made under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizen of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between the state or the citizens thereof, and foreign states, citizens, or subjects. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, and those in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. In all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. But when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. Section 3. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless, on the testimony of two witnesses, to the same overt act or confession in open court, the Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, but not attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture, except during the life of the person attainted.
Now, Islam. Now, in society, every day, throughout the weeks of every one of the 52 weeks that constitute the calendar year, our people have been going through venues that they have been told are courts. And most of those communications are made through the mail with instruments coming from men and women. Sometimes those instruments having on it an autograph, and very often not an autograph, and very often with a stamped autograph and not a wet ink signature. Also absent of official seals or raised seals, which would indicate official operations constitutionally in accord with law. The absence of a raised seal and a wet signature indicates a colorable operation. And you know, and I know, those who study jurisprudence, whenever such instrument comes through the mail, the United States jurisdiction, that constitutes mail fraud. And most of the time, the average being does not respond to it in their mind or in their reaction accordingly, recognizing that that's an instrument of fraud. Now, why is it, these are some questions that are being presented. Why is it that, one, most people never, in general, notice that, or it's not made an issue? And why is it that the persons that allegedly represent themselves as senators and congressmen at North America never respond to the general public in those matters that such activities are fraudulent? Answer: because it is they, the so-called senators and congressmen, operating on the land jurisdiction at North America, who are really the secret oligarchs behind the creation of that fraud, and are never really charged. And yet there's an assumption that they would be in place, or that they are in place, to secure and protect the rights of the people, claiming themselves to be public servants. Now, For those who study jurisprudence and know the real history operating here, know that they're really these people, men and women, claiming to be congressmen and senators at North emphasized are in fact not legitimate constitutional officers. And they have not been constitutional officers since 1871. It is an established legal and lawful fact. Local and municipal who have been actually feeding on the people, lecherously feeding on the people, robbing the people, etc., under their secret Treaty of Verona and under the Organic Act of Congress 1871. And when that is forgotten, people have a tendency to forget that these people are really de facto. It has nothing to do with whether you like them or not, or whether they like you or not, or whether they're claiming to be members of the Ku Klux Klan Party, which is known as the Democratic Party, or whether they're claiming to be supporters of the Constitution, which is the Republican Party, both parties of whom are flip sides of the same coins of a de facto order of secret oligarchs who have actually been running the judicial system under the barristry, the Accredited Bar Association, that is the British Accreditation Registry of England, and actually being administered from Westminster, i.e. London, in fact. And so all of the venues which have been misrepresented as courts at North America are actually run by the Bar Association and are indeed and in fact not constitutional courts. An uncomfortable truth, but that is the fact. And I think very often when we go through our everyday affairs, because we're busy, living, breathing, and trying to survive, that people have a tendency to forget that. And the other deal is many of them just don't know that. An uncomfortable truth, yes. An unethical but revealed truth, yes. An immoral situation that just happens to be the truth, yes. Extremely damaging, yes. Economically damaging and injurious, yes. A platform and a venue that actually promotes the peonage among the people, yes. A venue that actually robs the people in violation of law, yes. And we can go on and on and on. That's not opinion, that's fact. However, in general, not addressed. And when addressed, is usually attacked. That truth is attacked by these very people or people who support them, who are beneficiaries of the fraud that has been going on for generations. And because it's been going on for generations, many people are not aware of it. And organizations have been set up to argue the symptoms of these auction block venues that are actually misrepresented as courts. As an example, when you do a sociological study in North America, one of the common arguments that are made by people who allege to be interested in solving the problems among our people will talk about the high numbers of youth that are incarcerated, that are tagged from our communities, which they brand as, now understand these are brands, brand as Negroes, Black, Colored, Latino, etc., targeted communities. And they'll talk about the high percentage of the Asiatic people or what you call, enumerate the private POW camp systems that they call the state prison systems, and make comparisons of numbers, and they'll argue what is called the controlled narrative of racism and color and things like that, rather than tell the truth that these are actually genocidal operations under unum sanctum that actually been operating for a couple of centuries. An uncomfortable truth, but that's what the truth is. And so these venues that they've been calling courts are actually feudal law venues run by the Bar Association of England and the Bar Association subordinate operating at North America, which they refer to as the American Bar Association. And the different law firms that operate under them have a Roman Curia membership card that they pay dues, and they have been misrepresenting themselves to the people that the lawyers' licenses are actually delegation of authority orders coming under constitutional operations by which they are practicing law, as they say, before the people in these venues that are called courts, and often auction themselves to the people, offer them. As an example, a natural being can be called into one of these auction block venues, and they'll have a summons to come to these auction blocks called a traffic ticket, as an example. As you know, it's a base example. And one of the things that the auctioneer, who are calling themselves judges, will say, do you have a lawyer? Do you have a right to a lawyer or an attorney, etc.? In other words, they're soliciting from the bench for the Bar Association, and it never dawns on the people that solicitation from the bench indicates fraud. If that was a lawful court, it is unlawful for them to solicit a foreign agency operation from a lawful court. That's a violation of law. And it never dawns on people. They hear these things every day. And why is it that the administrative clerk, and quote unquote, that's an administrative clerk, who's usually a lawyer and a member of the Bar Association herself or himself, who are soliciting for their private, foreign, unregistered, unlicensed, unauthorized operation of human trafficking, called the Bar Association. And so from the door, the reason this corruption has going on because it starts from the top to the bottom. That's the problem. And there's an assumption with people often that there's a misunderstanding or a misconception amongst the people in there, and that those persons are in there to so-called represent the rights of people, and they're going to present an argument constitutional to protect the people's rights, when actually their operations are entirely unconstitutional, are entirely anti-constitutional, are entirely for the interests of the barristry or the barratry operations initiated from and administered from London, England. Now, those are the facts. Now, the assumption that these venues are courts is immediately wrong. Now, one of the reasons why, Isaiah, and I appreciate that you read from the Constitution for the United States, is because it lets you know what a court is. And it also demonstrates without argument what a delegated authority of a constitutional officer really is and how its origin is made. Now, in brief, when you have what is called constitutional presentment, it gives you the brief foundation so that it's comprehended. And so the average being who does not have what you call fundamental civic knowledge, which should be taught, starting in about the third degree, what's called third grade constitutional principle, would understand and know that if a court operation that would be referenced, those who are administering that court have no certification or verification of delegated authority posted, not within that court system, alleged, But in the entry of it, meaning that when you walk through the door, you're supposed to see a delegated certification of operations that that court was sanctioned by a de jure constitution by its representative operators called the Congress, and it is a public known for the public record. And that the persons who are running that court, their actual names would be listed as constitutional officers, and you would know who's who when you walk into that building. Not thereafter, not when someone starts a conversation, but posted. No different than if we went downtown to the mall, or uptown to the mall, or around the corner to the mall, and you go to buy a product, or you go to get a loaf of bread or juice or something like that, and you'll see posted on that building, people fetch a store, or, you know, any of your main stores, you'll see it before you get into the building what that store is. And logically, you would not go into, say, a burger store to get a refrigerator. You wouldn't expect it to be in there. Not that they don't have a refrigerator, but you don't expect to go in there to purchase a refrigerator. Nor would you expect to go to, as an example, one of your big major stores and buy French fries. Not that they wouldn't have a franchise inside that sells French fries. However, what you discover is people who don't know what constitutes a court have a tendency not to question people who are claiming to be the officers of a court. Now read Section 1 again of the Constitution and then analyze it for the public.
Article 3, Section 1. The judicial power, of the United States shall be vested in the one Supreme Court.
So stop right there. So there's only really one court, isn't it? And so any other court is simply, by delegated authority, a power of attorney represented venue that's outside of the one court venue. So therefore all courts, lawful courts, are supreme. It's the only court that exists. Now, I know from the principle of jurisprudence, and most of you know that already, but you also know that the average being out there is not apprised of that truth and concept, although it's right there for them. Why? Because very few institutions teach civics. Why do they not teach civics? Because many of the institutions and those who have been benefiting from their existence are actually feeding off the injuries of the people. And because they've been doing it for so many generations, the people have not been cognizant that these institutions do not represent them and never did. You know, but there are multiple institutions that are existing at North America and operating under the guise of dealing with the problems that are instituted or that are a result of the injuries of the people due to these auction block operations that these people don't know are auction blocks. Go ahead.
And it says shall be vested in one Supreme Court. So vested means fixed and absolute.
So that means even if there's a rebuttal, it can only be settled on that principle. So go ahead and then analyze as you please.
Okay. And in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish.
So how would one know that that court is a court? It would be a delegated authority, and it would be very clear that such officers have been times for that place to be called a court. Now, question to the public, question to everybody in general. These venues and seeing at the entrance of the building certification certificates with the signatures of the Congress for the United States that verifies that venue as being a court. And if you haven't seen that, it's not a court. And if they have human beings walking in there, going to jail or paying fines, it's an auction block. And it's been that way for quite some time. Now, people who don't understand constitutional principles think that very often when our people go into these venues and get abused or get sentenced to camps and stuff like that, that they're going to a legitimate jail when actually these are POW camps. The lack of due process is the fact that they're unconstitutional. As an example, read Amendment 4 and Amendment 9 to the Constitution for the United States. And I want you to analyze that in harmony with the articles.
Okay. Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. So they should be having, if they're issuing a summons or a warrant, they should be having a delegated authority order attached to and raised seal attached to those instruments showing what delegation of authority that they derive from as far as them being the de jure government. It says, against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause. So it falls under the rules of law. It have to be suspected of a crime. You can't just say that, oh, you know, I'm just going to call you into court because X, Y, Z. You have to have a probable cause.
What would be included with that? In other words, use your common sense. What would be included with that? Think. It must be the claim made by the accuser with the signature. It must be an affidavit attached by the accuser and what the accusation actually is with that instrument.
So you can't just say, I'm summoning you to appear for X, Y, Z. You got to state the claim, the nature of the claim, the nature of the crime.
Who the being is.
Exactly.
It cannot be an entity. It must be a living man or woman who is the accuser and makes the claim.
And it says supported by oath or affirmation, so you have to state
supported by.
Exactly.
Exactly. So that means it must be thereto attached. I'm bringing that to your attention to bring note to the fact that the average being who does not know civics, who has never been associated with a civic organization such as the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which is a civic organization, is not aware of that. Any organization or people who are talking about nationhood, nationality, nation of this, nation of that, such and such nation, that nation, other nation, if they're talking nation at all, they're talking constitutional relations with other nation states. If they're talking statehood, they're talking constitution in relationship to self, in relationship to others. The bridge or the connection that one has in association with others is via constitutional principle. And treaties would be categorized accordingly. And so the deal and the point of it is, we're establishing the fact that that protocol of operations is not common among our people and should be. The absence of it has been dangerous, detrimental, and every other negative. It's not racism, it's not prejudice, it's a lack of constitutional due process. And the fact that the people in general are not aware of what due process is and its requirement by law, and it having been absent for generations, never questions this. Now consider this. As an example, those who have been participants in any manner with the Moorish Divine and National Movement is aware of the fact that that was always emphasized by Noble Drew Ali. And also keep in mind, Noble Drew Ali, even referring to himself, and this is a total different lesson, reminds you that the half has not been told. And that if he told you everything, you'd go back to sleep. So even the assumption that people know everything about Noble Drew Ali is also only half told, including who he is, what his real name is, what it is not, and a whole bunch of other things. And this is because he did not promote mysticism. However, he came to the people in a degree of mysticism where they were to bring them out of the mysticism. And most of them never get to that degree because those who have been given the degrees have not been telling the truth, or all of it, or seeking to tell the other half. However, it has never been a secret where Noble Drew Ali says, I pull the wool off of all secret organizations. And he also reminds the people, he says, some of your grand governors have followers. Some of your grand sheiks have followers. Some of your sheikesses have followers. But I, your prophet, have no followers. You must examine that to kind of really understand what he's really telling you. He's telling you he didn't come here for you to follow him. He came here to liberate you from that follower mentality. And I want to also present to you this. Knowing that there's opposition on multiple levels, he actually gave you a key to your liberation from the door by saying, Allah and man are one. This is so to get you to ultimately recognize, stop looking outside of yourself. And we know that a lot of people don't get that on an immediate tip, but that's very important. So let's go back to constitutional principle. You see? So when a man or woman claims to represent you, they're already robbing you. Are we clear? And anyone who claims to be a bar association member comes to represent you. The word itself implies power of attorney without you giving it. That's also called leave. G, can you read from the law book? Leave, please, yes. And when you get that, you tell me that you're ready.
And while she's doing that, just
Yes.
Amendment 9.
Keep it going.
So, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So, it all goes back to us. We don't need representation.
Back up. Go ahead. Talk.
We don't need representation in the first place.
Exactly.
You have your unalienable birthrights that you should be putting them on notice in the first place.
So you need to be aware of them in the first place to comprehend that the divine sovereign right that's represented in government never leaves the people. It's assigned to delegated people who are chosen as constitutional officers while you're busy about your work. At such time that they breach, the office for them is dead, not whether you vote them out or not.
And that's what indemnity bonds are
The sooner we get this through these people's heads. The problem of it is that people don't know what birthright is. They hear these words, and it doesn't dawn on them what birthright is. And so, not unlike we were talking earlier, what you showed, there's a concept in the people's mind that they need to ask someone else for authority to claim right of their own estate. And that they have to dance through an application loop. Notifying them. The resistance that you get is because they're aware that someone, if not yourself, has told you the truth about what civilization rules are. It's called constitutional principle. And what you discover when we start examining these things, we started recognizing that people who even claim constitutional principle don't really get the basics of what constitutional principle is, or what due process is. And they have not been given or allowed due process for generations and don't even know they've been breached. Now, when you read the Constitution for the United States, including what is called the Bill of Rights, and you start doing more research, you'll discover that it actually has origin in fatwa, which is Muslim law. And it is generally not associated that way with people because it's not taught. And it confuses them when Europeans breach constitutional principle, when the people assume that that's where their offices are vested. It never dawns on them the reason they don't support constitutional law, because they're not supporting fatwa law. That they're actually crusaders. And people keep forgetting that the reason they always oppose constitutional law because they're feudalists. It never dawns on people that these people who are claiming to be congressmen and senators are actually enemies of the Constitution for the United States, which is why they always surface use it to authorize themselves and then do everything thereafter against it, i.e. against the people. And all legislation executed by them is always and only for the United States Service Corporation and the barratry operations of England. And this is what they constantly do, and yet it doesn't dawn on the average person who doesn't pay attention to this that they're actually lobbyists for the United States Corporation Company, which is why the people always lose. As an interim argument, and it's not a support for, but just for something you to think of. When you understand just this little bit that we've talked about already, and don't get it twisted, you'll understand why there's so much opposition to Donald Trump, who didn't come through the circle. That's not support for him. I'm just pointing this out to you. He has opposition from the Ku Klux Klan Party, which is known as the Democratic Party, and he has opposition from the Republican Party, who's the other side of the Whitmore Party. Why? Because he didn't come through the ranks of either side. Not because he's great, and not because he's some constitutional savior. It is that he's more in harmony with constitutional principle than either of those sides. That's what the real opposition is. And people have been operating unconstitutional for so many generations that many people think that Donald Trump is out to lunch. Really. If you understand constitutional principle, and again, like I said, let me qualify this because people keep twisting what we say. Not support for Donald Trump. But in principle, he's more constitutional than anybody in these platforms. That's why they want him in prison. That's really why they won't support anything that he does. Because the reality, what is often referred to as the deep state, is really the oligarchy, congressmen and senators who have been in power unconstitutionally since February the 24th, 1871, which has its root in the coup d'etat against the Lincoln administration of March of 1861. Now, that's the truth. Now, one of the keys that you will discover when you do research into England's operations and the barristers' operations on Fleet Street and their operations at North America, you will find that the average person is not aware that these people are really enemies of the legitimate republic and have never been constitutional officers. And that the venues that they have set up in your corporate state franchise operations are indeed auction blocks for human trafficking. And then when you look at the operations of the conversion of the word person given in 1868 to the United States franchise subdivisional entity operations, you recognize that that actually is a legal but not lawful platform by which conversion is being made of the people's estates, and therefore the institutionalization of peonage and piracy connotatively presented as slavery. That's a so in all the linguistics that have been designed, including the brand system, is and was put in place to support that system. And again, people forget, and it doesn't dawn on many people when, say, Noble Drawley mentioned to the people of birthright theft, and that the Europeans are living off your virtues. That connection is not usually made by most people of how it is done. That it is done, yes, but how it is done. And so it is very important for people to understand that the auction block system and the hijacking of Article 3 court, or Article 3, the abrogation of Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States, is the foundation for the feudal operations at North America from a legal perspective, not lawful. And that is what has been in operation. Interject.
This is from the original 20 sections.
Go ahead.
This is in the Treaty of Peace and Friendship booklet. I was going to read section 12, the traffic.
No, go give the title so people have a reference.
Yeah, this is the original 20 sections of the 13th Amendment from the congressional records. And reading section 12, it brought to mind, the traffic in slaves with Africa is hereby forever prohibited on pain of death and the forfeiture of all the rights and property of persons engaged therein, and the descendants of Africans shall not be citizens. And that ties back to Article 3, Section 3, when it talks about the bills of attainders. Article 3, Section 3, when it says treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. So a lot of our people are being corrupted by these bills of attainders and being called into their tribunal systems, and then once they're being called in these systems, now their bloodline is being corrupted because they are under a feudal system and not aware of it. And
not just that. Now look what you just identified. Now you're talking process. Corruption of blood is the branding system, which denies bloodline and the birthright, by which this corruption can be serviced, and thus your culpable instrumentality. Key, I'm adding to where you're going with that, and feel free to continue.
Yeah, because when you agree to accept those instruments and you are tacitly acquiescing to those instruments, now you are treasonous yourself as a national, because you cannot change your nationality except through the power of Allah. That's the only way man can change their descent. So we are actually partaking in the treason when we consent and don't actually, stand up. That's why Noble Drawley said, I want active warrants, not passive warrants.
Yes.
Look at the etymology of passive.
Yes.
That means that you are not rebutting anything. You're not rebutting the claims that they're making against you. You just tacit.
Now, when you look at the statement where he says, the violations on our part, where we've been practicing those names and those principles that delude to slavery, and the connotative meaning of slavery is actually the peonage and the piracy, and the arbitrary, that is the practice under the feudal law systems that constitutes the foundation for the birthright theft via the human trafficking venues that are called courts, but are not courts. Now, because the people themselves, whose obligation it is to enforce that Constitution, have not been standing up for it, they've been suffering the consequence. It's not attitude, it's violation of Constitution. So we're violating our own makeup, because that's what Constitution means, and we're violating the divine laws that are predicated on that make-up and put into written form to govern the affairs of men. Once you begin to analyze and dissect the Constitution, you can see the moral root in it, and also many of the statements made by the illustrious prophet Nudrali that have gone really unanswered and unenforced. Yet people repeat these things commonly, as if they, care for, love the prophet Nudrali. I suggest that you go among some of these people who made those claims and you start talking civics, they will attack you as if you have the devil. They will. And it's unfortunate, and while it goes on, nevertheless, it is the duty of those who know to dispense a clearer comprehension and understanding amongst those, particularly the youth who are coming in and becoming cognizant of these things but don't have a civic foundation, to make that available to them. Go ahead.
And it's like, when I first came into the movement, we talked about this earlier, I just wanted to do stuff. I wanted to get active, but I didn't have the protocols in place. And like, for example, when you go into these tribunals, what we call courts, I know from playing sports, you got different types of courts. You got basketball court, you got tennis court, volleyball court, and there's normally rules and procedures to the courts. So for example, in the tennis court, the rules are no loud music, no drinks on the court, no food on the court. I went to the tribunals not realizing there was rules and procedures to the court. So I was just trying to act and do things, I got my rights, and I didn't really know. So now where I'm at, since I know there's protocols that's needed to be in place, there's rules that how you are actually going about these processes is already in place, and this Constitution that we're going by that our ancestors created actually it's a very beautiful document when you dissect it, because the rights, like we read in Amendment 9, is already ours. It's protected and secured. The protocols are right there. So that's a Amendment 9 affidavit. That's as we the people, we set the standard for the type of government that we are commonly referred to as common law.
Yes. Now, this is why. Now, keep in mind, when the reference is made to common law, they're talking constitutional law. Now, when you're making reference to what is known as common law, you're making reference to what is called divine law or natural law. And therefore, the common law is offensive to no man, for it is in harmony with the living being in actuality. And any counter to it is actually in opposition and is an action of an enemy of the proper state of affairs of nationhood. So what the barristers have been doing is actually treating the people as if they are enemies of the state. When you comprehend that, which was reaffirmed, I think it was during the Delano Roosevelt era type, and they did what is called the War Powers Act, etc. It's actually where they declare the people the enemies. And of course, this is where they've been stealing people's property. And as me and Tamara was talking earlier today, when you're making reference to the registry of cars, and you're talking about a title to a car, and we made that refined argument, certificate of title is not a title. It's just a certificate that says, hey, guess what? There's a title somewhere, but you ain't got it. You know, we never look at it that way, but that's what it is. And so we must, being Moorish Americans and being in support of the original program of the Civic Order of Restoration of the State, established called the Old Canaanite Temple, and the Moorish Temple of Science, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which has never been incorporated. It is the duty and responsibility to make those who are not aware of it, aware of it. And also make them aware that the religious affidavit, which was adopted in 1928, was as an interim act to protect the movement activities and the estates of people as people were coming in who didn't have a background, not to be confused with the unincorporated status of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which is the order of civics and governmental operations. And this is again why a lot of times you'll see Noble Drawley reference Marcus Garvey to keep people's mind clear, because people have a tendency to forget that you're talking government structure. You know, and I wanted to bring that to your attention because again, when people don't have a background, they have a tendency to get caught in the emotions of personalities, you know, or in the imagery that is often practiced by people who are deceiving the people by keeping this worshipful image of Noble Drawley rather than paying attention to the constitutional enforcement foundation that he presented. And also why he say, I, your prophet, have no followers. You need to really understand or analyze what he's really saying to you. He's actually a liberator. But in order also, with the opposition that was coming at him from multiple places, which is also by a real tracer of who he actually is, and even his parents was always left vague in truth. But he reminds you that the have has not been told. So when you do a little more research, you're going to find out a lot of things that are not what you see on the surface. But the real deal, what he did as a liberator, he came in another name. Like he'll say, I came around the elbow to reach my thumb, yeah. You know, and the real deal of it is because when it all boils down, you're going to find out the vaguity of his resentment, and what's going to be left for you to do is to pay attention to what he brought you and what you to do with this information and not be so tied up in him, because you really don't know him. You may think you do. You comprehend it? And people who understand that really get upset when they discover you found that out. You know, because they want to keep you mystified when you're actually being liberated. You know, so again, let's present, do you have more to say? And G, will you share with us, leave? Now remember, when people assign themselves or associate themselves with attorneys who've been misrepresenting themselves as attorneys, so keep in mind, this is who these people really are. That's who they present themselves to the public. That's who they really are. All right? And when you associate with them or think that you're hiring them or getting them to so-called represent you, what you're alleging and allowing is called leave. And when there's an assumption that you have right of jurisdiction of your property, Tamara, you know, or your rights, there's an assumption that that exists, and this man or woman is arguing on your behalf to maintain that integrity of your right of estate. That's an assumption. And so you're thinking that you challenge this jurisdiction of people stepping into your estate. Well, let's look what leave really means. Go ahead, G.
Islam. Leave, it says to give, and then there's a case law. It further states to allow or cause to remain, to let remain unmoved or undone, to refrain from or neglect taking, doing, or changing, to let stay or continue, to let be without interference, to suffer, to remain subject to another's action, control, or the like, to suffer, to be undisturbed in action. That's case law again.
And keep going.
Okay. It further says to give or dispose of by will, to bequeath, I'm not sure, forgive me for the mispronunciation if there was any, or devise. It further states to put, place, deposit, deliver, or the like. And last and finally, it states willful departure with intent to remain away and not temporary absence with intention of returning.
So that means when you deal with them, they're really sophisticated bounty hunters that you just hired to deliver you and to leave your ass at the mercy of these people you've been delivered to, of whom they are in membership with. Now go look at in appropriate persona and read that. Now, this is a relationship to national and nationalization, and anybody is talking nationhood, nation of this or nation of that, or Moorish nation or nation of anything, and don't tell you these truths in relationship to what that represents and what that is in society in your relationship to others. Also, not explaining to you that black is a brand that takes you out of the proper status or standing, which is also why the brand system is put in place, including the fact that Europeans put their family names on defeated Moors in order to remove them from standing in law, which would mean being yourself. Now, in relationship to Noble Drew Ali and his references to Moorish Americans, how did the Prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans?
Teaching them to be themselves.
So, what he said, if you don't believe that the program that I have for the redemption of my people and citizens are correct, all right, go to those who know law. So go to law book and look what being yourself is in law term. In appropriate persona, 3 words. And then, of course, when you read it, go ahead and make your analysis accordingly. And also, you got a yellow marker, so you're going to get used to that.
Really?
I
don't think I'm marking it, but I guess I should.
Make sure you mark that stuff out.
Definitely need it.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Here you go. Oh, you got to. All right. Hook her up.
Double check.
Yes. Here you go. Mark it off. Go ahead, mark it off. Work them. Down the bottom. Like the whole thing, go through the whole thing, go through the whole thing. And on the next page. And on the next page, now go ahead.
Even the small
Now,
print?
On the other side, yellow, mark it all out. And then analyze it too. So, how did the Prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans?
By teaching them to be themselves.
What does that involve that a lot of people who don't know civics is not aware of?
Steps.
restoring the standing of the being in society, distinguished from the state of affairs that exists in that dead status, which is called simple mortus, which is what the black brand represents, a dead status. That's why he says, and we're not talking etymology, we're talking social engineering. Therefore, black, according to science, means death. It is not an etymological analysis, it's a social engineering analysis relative to descendancy and heritability. All right, G.
Islam.
All right, read in appropriate persona. And take in consideration, leave that you already read.
Right.
All right, go ahead. And analyze accordingly.
Okay. An appropriate persona in one's own proper person. It also says it is a rule in pleading that pleads to the jurisdiction of the court must be pled in appropriate persona, because if pleaded by attorney, they admit the jurisdiction, as an attorney is an officer of the court and he is presumed to plead after having obtained leave,
So
which
that
admits
means-
jurisdiction.
Exactly. So now after you hire one, you can't even challenge jurisdiction. When you understand that now, you understand CMB's statement in the registry of the Zodiac Constitution. And also why people who betrayed Noble Drew Ali get upset when you bring up a CMB. And that they're actually enemies to the prophet, but they've been claiming jurisdiction in some of the temples, not all, some of the temples, and why they get demonly angry if you come and talk in civics, which is constitutional common law enforcement, which they have pledged to promote. Now, when one lacks civic fundamental instruction, one gets caught in the emotion and never pays attention that many of these people are enemies of the state, but they're in positions of office and are in severe breach, not just breach, severe breach of trust, and in violation to your birthright. Now, if you're willing to let these people keep administering over your life, it's called consent. And so we know that many of the people are not aware of these things, and so we do the best that we can to share with them fundamental information so that they themselves can take charge of their lives. Because those persons who've been claiming to represent them have actually been selling them out in these auction blocks, which is why many people who have been claiming to be grand governors and grand chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple in secret have been actually working with the gangs of New York called the police department, even against their own brothers and sisters who've been working to enforce that constitution as if they are enemies to the cause, when it's actually the opposite. How would you know? Simply understanding the constitutional principles. You don't try to convince people, you take them to the law, let them read it for themselves and break it down. And this is back to even some conversations that we have when we talk about concepts. You know, people think they got to, study hard and be PhDs for years. No, this is 10 articles, it's what? 7 articles, 10 Bill of Rights. And if you look at that and start analyzing, not just reading it through, stop and analyze it, it becomes very clear that the concepts of many of the average people who deal with problems every day, their concepts are wrong. Now, if you want to expand on that, go ahead. That's what I'm saying, Rosin.
Wow.
That's fine.
The only thing I was thinking about is the fact that, there's no need to get into the subject matter or, or anything in regards to the reason why you're in a tribunal, because you're there making a special appearance. You're there to inform them and put them on notice who you are. Granted, they should already have all of the notices ahead of time, but
to clear up the matter
yeah.
and to remove what is called assumed hypothecated jurisdiction.
Islam.
And hypothecated should be added to assumed jurisdiction. You know, and this is again why it's very important for everyone to know fundamentally in jurisdictional operations between beings in what would be called a court, the status of the being before the court and all conditions is set for the record from the door. Then the conditions of whether jurisdictions exist predicated on that first point is established for the record. And if things are validated or invalidated, then proceedings begin, and then the determination is also made as what is called territorial jurisdiction, after the subject matter jurisdiction, whether the persons claiming to be constitutional officers have right to exercise that power on the land, because you're talking territorial land. Now you're talking nationality, aren't you? And when you study the operations that have been going on, each one of those areas which are primal to the issue of jurisdiction have been breached as a matter of law and a matter of general practice and operations at North America, and have not gone challenged.
Part of my introduction, can I just read
Go ahead,
a piece of the treaty, piece of friendship? But it talks about diversity. It states that diversity is a condition or circumstance of being diverse or different, and it states that diversity also is a consideration in the case. Diversity issues must eventually arise from time to time and to national intercourse, but the part that I find the most interesting is where it states, therefore, diverse considerations for assuring proper venue, proper jurisdiction qualifications, proper identification classification, and all other related council application must come into play.
Exactly. Now when you recognize that, right? Now you recognize, if you look and read as an example, as a reference point for those who are studying, Noble Ali's Divine Warning by the Prophet for the Nations, and you read the first paragraph, and it immediately goes into argument of diversity. Can you share that with us? And this is a point of reference that's very important. Divine Warning by the Prophet for the Nations, and go into just the first paragraph and then analyze it.
Islam. The divine warning by the Prophet for the nations, the citizens of all free national governments, according to that national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and are subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatments that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the names and the principles that lead to slavery.
That's the first paragraph, which indicates diversity. Do you notice how many people who have nationality cards and are grand governors of the Moorish Science Temple of America, grand chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple of America, chiefesses and grand chiefesses of the Moorish Science Temple of America, that come immediately in opposition to that as soon as you mention the Court of Diversity, which comes to the Court, Article 3, Section 2. And it is self-evident, and yet, for the most part, people get caught up in the arguments of the controversy without noticing that, which means not only that they don't know civics, they definitely haven't been teaching it.
Islam.
Go ahead.
Just going back to Amendment 9, I'll read it real quick. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So when they're telling you Noble Drelly just told you. He just said, don't cling to those principles.
Names and principles.
Names and principles that delude to slavery. So those principles being under color of law that delude to slavery, being those bills of attainder, the driver's license, the birth certificates, marriage certificates, all of those delude to those principles outside of the Constitution.
Exactly.
And they're telling you to adhere to that. So they're showing you that they're in opposition.
Exactly. Now, again, feel free to analyze what becomes obvious. And I want to present this to you, and I want to present this to everyone. These points are being made and brought up to you because what we're bringing to you is to recognize why res judicata exists as a point of study and why stare decisis exists as a point of study. For these are principles of law that are set forth, that are indisputable by anyone who claims to be any constitutional officer of any alleged court. And if they dispute these principles, they are indeed not who they claim to be and are indeed enemies of the state. And that you should not allow such persons to convert their guilt upon you as if you're out of order. Not by belief, but facts of law. And this is again why whenever you're dealing with these people who claim to be constitutional officers, you always bring your constitution, your treaty, your national standard, their oath of office, and the oath of ethics that they're required to sign. And these are fundamental protocols. And it becomes quite evident immediately that these people are criminals. Not only are they outside the law and enemies, they are actually criminals. And they've been operating for decades against the interest of the people. And people have been put on a guilt trip for even questioning them. We must educate and make the people erudite in these matters of fundamental common law in order that they defend their birthright. Give the brother the mic for a minute. Islam.
Is the creation of Negro, Black, and Colored a part of the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, etc.?
It has life actually after that. Although it has some root there, it has more to do with the Dutch, the German Dutch operators under the India Pacific Company that come to Manhattan in New York. And they really promoted that paradigm of the Negro, Black, Colored, Indian thing in order to disconnect the people from the land and also to create schisms among the people. So when you come amongst the people, you'll see many of our people who do not understand that Negro, Black, Colored, Native American are social engineering terms to create schism among us so that they can claim the land. And also when it comes to the issue of us recognizing that we are heirs of the estate, we ourselves, by adopting those terms and names that delude to slavery, actually divide amongst ourselves. As an example, so you'll have Moors in one area call themselves people of color. You have Moors in this area call themselves Native American. You have Moors in this area call themselves Indians. You have Moors in the next area call themselves colored people. You have Moors over there call themselves Negroes. You have Moors over here call themselves black. None of these terms have anything to do with pedigree bloodline. But they were trained to believe that they are African, Asiatic bloodline identities. Once they're adopted, they're disconnected from the pedigree and the bloodline of the heirs of the estate, including treaty and constitution. And yes, it is correct, though it has its root origin in the Spanish Inquisition, its establishment as a protocol of activity comes from the German Dutch masters of the India Pacific Company. Yes. And this is again why, like when they're promoting the military operations of cancer in the communities, they will promote different flavors of tainted tobacco and even put on the package Dutch masters. Which is a secret. They don't even hide it. You know, but when people don't know the history, they don't even know that the genocide operations is always promoted in your face. This is so that to some degree they remove the karmic debt by telling the people what they're doing to them. This is from a divine origin, meaning that even the dark priesthood know that divine law does not recognize personal station. And a lot of people who really don't understand the operations of the dark priesthood wonder why the dark priesthood will tell you what they're going to do to you and then do it. And so why did they tell us? Oh, they'll codify it, but it's because of natural law. Because they know the natural rule of reciprocity and compensation. That's just a reminder for those of you who are metaphysicians. And then those of you who really know the science. You know, and also that whether you're dealing with doctors that deal with the light and doctors that deal with the dark. Most of your priesthood is corrupt. You have very few priests that are honorable. And that's one of the things that's plaguing humanity, is that they're assuming that the title priest represents good. Not necessarily. There is a nigga named Carpenter. He's a carpenter and he can mess your house up too. You know, it's what they choose to do. You know, and it's back to, like when you look at from a Kabbalistic point of view, when you look at Septuaginta or the Bible, it's a common thing or common statement that really should be analyzed for what it is. When it says the sun shines on the good as well as the evil, that is to let you know that the powers of nature are neutral. Their usages is what you need to examine. Therefore, you must have a knowledge of constitutional make-up in order to properly categorize and analyze things at all times in your relationship to other beings, including the make-up that your mother gave you of the Temple of Solomon, which is actually the physical temple of the being. This is where constitution comes in, or what you call your look into the sun, or what you call horoscope. You know, this gives you your markers. It gives you a sight. It gives you a carpenter's view of your path. Distinguished from what is put upon you, and you say, well, you know, I like vanilla sandwiches. Maybe. Maybe your chart doesn't say that. And so if you've been living a life that's contradictory to that, you may recognize a lot of problems that you bring upon yourself. And you adjust your life accordingly. But also when you do a more refined look, then you understand how masterminds trace themselves. By the rule of law, not by belief, by the science and the rule of law. And logically, those dark priests do not want that knowledge among the common people. Why? Because you will liberate yourself from the dark priesthood immediately, even with limited knowledge. Once you know the fundamental rules, you'll start liberating. And this is again why this information gets a lot of people upset. Because what you will discover, and it's unfortunate, that 90% of all institutions that have been operating at North America are from their core of operations absolutely and deleteriously corrupt from the design, from the beginning. And of course, those who benefited from the subjugation of humanity would certainly not want you to look at things constitutionally. Because the maxims and the axioms, so write that down, maxims and axioms, which are standard protocol in metaphysical and civil operations and divine law operations, and are not contrary to the nature of any living being. They are fundamental to your study systems. You know, and again, you will recognize by why the priesthood relegate most humans only to the educational level of learning systems, which is absolutely for animals. So a proper education system will start with an education which is for animals and then take you to erudition, which is for humans. You know, and this is again why Drew Ali said, I pulled the wool off of all secret societies for you to learn that. And this is why, again, people who really don't want people to develop won't tell them what adept really means in your relationship to the Moorish movement. They hear this word thrown around, but they don't tell you that there's another level of thinking. And even that is a beginner's level. I repeat, even adeptus is also a beginner's level. Just a reminder. Floor's open.
When you think you know, you got far to go.
Right.
Say again?
When you think you know, you got far to go.
Yes. Islam, brother.
Islam. If it is that the American dollar is only backed by the government's word.
Back up with what you're saying. Now, oh, I know where you're going, but this is Cognizance. And back to now. So let's establish the record. For the record, a dollar comes from the word Yakumthal, which means a pressed gold coin. Nothing else is a dollar. All right, so, and this is why I'm just checking you, is because we have listeners and they know that when they come to the venue of the House of Reawakening Minds, you know, and this is back to when we adopt statements that appear on their surface correct, and we actually promote the dark side unconsciously, seeking the light. So therefore, we pull each other's coattail, and you do the same for me.
Absolutely.
You know, so the U.S. dollar is a lie. Unless you pull out a silver or gold coin that was constitutionally minted. As expressed, Article 1, Section 10. Read that real quick, but hold your thought.
Absolutely.
Now, and so what we want to do when we're asking questions, particularly when you're conscious, or we're here at the house, we know that people are listening around the world, not just here, around the world. And so for ourselves, and particularly for the youth coming in, we want to give them clean thought, because the statements that have been made to them are dirty.
Sure.
And what happens is they will pick up the statements and repeat them in goodwill, and actually be walking into the doo-doo pools on the lawn that somebody told them was peanut butter. Now read Article 1, Section 10, and then go back to your question.
Okay.
Don't forget your question, but restructure it.
I got it. Absolutely.
Go ahead, good brother. Go ahead, good brother. And then give the mic back to him. Don't lose your...
I got it.
All right. But remember, it's for the people who are listening.
Absolutely.
All right, go ahead.
All right, Article 1, Section 10. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility.
All right, so you understand that even the training that the people have, that they paid a bill, is a false paradigm that's been promoted for generations, and there's assumption that under these feudal law operations that they don't know they're operating under, because it's been misrepresented by the barristers and the lobbyists for the United States Corporation, who've been falsely claiming to be senators and congressmen, who are indeed not, but are actually secret oligarchs and lobbyists and board of directors for the Queen of England under their agreed secret Treaty of Verona, contrary to the Constitution that they've been presenting to the people. So there is the foundation. So now, again, restructure your question and statement, because it's a combined statement and question. Go ahead.
It is. If it is that the Federal Reserve Bill is only backed by the United States corporations.
Now, let's stop right there. So soon, and this is analysis, as soon as you said note, you said debt. So it can't be backed by a damn thing other than the labor and the enslavement of the people. You see? So we're not even qualifying whether or not it's backed, because it can't be backed by gold, because it can't be money and not in debt at the same time. You can't be unpregnant and pregnant in the same argument. And so when they say United States dollar bill, it's an oxymoron. It can't be a bill and a dollar in the same breath. The point that I'm making to you is for us to begin to recognize that they're projecting the lie in common linguistics, which is accepted as legitimate and is repeated. But in doing so, you're lying. And so it creates a liability on your part when they come after you under the false pretext of being government. When you say, I paid that bill, I paid that fine, I paid that mortgage, made my payment with a dollar bill, multiple lies. The intent and the goodwill of honor is there with most people. But they don't recognize as soon as they start talking, it is called, quote unquote, and write this down, it's called confessed judgment. Write that down, it's very important. I want you to analyze this and interject now or in the future. It's called confessed judgment. That would involve in foreclosures too. And in every other operation. Now, again, as we're analyzing this stuff, with some people, they may think that we're being semantically picky.
No.
Guess what, if you're not? That's been our problem.
Absolutely right.
And, we cannot allow connotative linguistic statements to live and then talk about liberation in the same, it don't go together. Go ahead, interject, give that back in, but come back.
I got it. I still have
But come back if there's something else you want to add to that. Because this interchange is how we develop.
Absolutely.
And even as we've been studying for years, how language that we commonly use that we don't assume actually undoes what we think we're doing. We think we're doing something and we're actually undoing the work that we're trying to do. It's like you putting a nail in the wood, and it's winter time, and you're nailing up the holes in the side of the house, and I'm on the other side knocking the nail back out. But we brothers and stuff. We put this house together. You understand? The baby's gonna be born this year, and then next year they're always cold. You put windows in, we throw rocks at them from the inside. And we think that we're doing well. This is one of the reasons why the Europeans in North America are in power, including their Negro guy, leader 32, the Mason Reverend guys who they think are delivering these people to Jesus, who are really working for the Popes of Rome, and they document that too. And it confuses us why we keep on going in these circles trying to fix things and nothing gets fixed. And don't recognize that we're practicing names and principles that delude to slavery. Continue, good brother.
Islam, just going back, in Amendment 7, in suits at common law, where the value and controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So any dispute arising over $20, you have a right to a trial by jury. So including foreclosures, for example, they're trying to foreclose, you got a right to a trial by jury. Now, we know that you exchanging Federal Reserve notes in lieu of lawful money, and they're trying to call you into the civil military tribunals, and and escheat your estate. So what you do, you call your trial by jury.
Yes.
And then you will affidavit, okay, to that parent company for that person claiming that they are owned in the
Now,
bank.
let's back up again. Let's fix things. Let's fix things. And it's no different than when we were, no different than when we were talking the other night. And I remind Brother Troy when we were talking, right? This is why in 1868 they started promoting the corporate entities as person, so we can say the company. The company can't speak shit. And don't excuse my language. Always name a living man or woman. He just, or she may be a representative who claimed power of attorney to speak for some entity that they allege they got some finance from to give to you. We'll talk about, act like the corporation don't even damn exist. Always be Joe Blow Belaski, the European guy sitting over there, you know, the pale skin one, who claimed to be American, and he clearly is not. He said, I owe him something. You know, I don't care about Bank of America. I don't know. Bank of America can't talk. See, and this is how they've been getting over. They've been using their corporate entities as persons, and we have not been challenging that and presenting as a representative the person corporate in the court venues to speak against you, make charges, and you never challenge them because they can't speak anyway. You accepting the confessed judgment that's already in place, that's not even thought to be challenged. Then you start trying to argue a defense, and the confessed judgment is actually already in. As soon as you start talking about payments, you're already lying. But you don't know that you're lying. It's not your intent to lie. Meanwhile, you don't know about the hypothecation. Meanwhile, you don't know that you're not really in a courtroom. You're assuming that you are. However, that makes you a ward because you're supposed to know better. Because the Constitution is fundamental to the operations of government. Period. And it's not complex. It's 7 articles and 10 Bill of Rights. At what point is that confusing to you? So you're held to that, although they're disallowing you its use. Because they altered and said Constitution of the United States, which is a private instrument, and have you operating off of an unusable document that sounds or looks similar when it's a mask. This is back to the point when you always say go back to that state of mind of your, because you want to discover this. That has not been told. I'm just giving you a view. It's not opinion. He's actually leading you to things, but warning you that the hand has not been told, which means the presentments as presented to you at the time that he came to us is not to be accepted on its face without examination, but simply as a primer to a pump. You know, like someone starts priming a pump, you know, like the old wells, they used to have these pumps where you prime them, and then you pour water in them, and you prime them. Don't get that confused with the intent of your outcome. That's to get you started. That's not where you're supposed to be. Meaning that you start to learn to ride bicycle, you know what I mean? Here you are, you know rolling, you know, you see your boy come down here on the street. With his 10 speed, but you still got training wheels on it. You know, say, training wheel with balloons and stuff. You know. What's happening with us, and we don't get it. The Moorish movement is to bring your attention to these things, not to challenge your intelligence, but for you to recognize that you've been trained in connotative linguistics, and it has hampered you. It's not about challenging your basic intelligence. And if you don't pay attention to those details, you walk into the puddles of doo-doo, and it appears that you're consenting. And you're held to that consent, but it is not consent. It is deception. You know, and It cannot be emphasized enough. Now, when it comes to res judicata, as an example, and stare decisis issue, as an example, let me read some examples to you so that we can look at these things. A Supreme Court decision, so that's the vesting of the one court. This is why Supreme Court stare decisis always seem to clash with state court decisions. Why? Because the state courts are incompetent. Because they're not courts. As an example, Supreme Court, this will be stare decisis or res judicata. In its nature, and this will go across the board, a government may not require an individual, and that must be qualified, to relinquish rights guaranteed him or her by the First Amendment as a condition of public employment, which they start doing even when you start going into these venues, so-called job seeking or applying for certain jobs, and they'll require you to waive rights to work in that position. They're already violating you constitutionally, but yet they've been doing that. Now, stare decisis or Supreme Court rulings would be used to counter them when they do that. Also, to bring suit against their surety bonds when they institute it. And those things must be a normal practice or response as a norm and taught to people at large. That's how you will unravel this yarn of corruption. And if those practices and protocols are not instituted, the corruption continues. Because these people are not your government. They're actually pirates on land operating as government, when in fact they're actually warring against you and warring against the Constitution. And I think very often people are looking at issues of, say, noble equality and people who have been trying to liberate our people and looking at the attacks made on them as personal attacks on them, not recognizing the attack is made on you. And when you don't see it that way, you don't understand birthright. Because one of the things that people need to understand about noble equality is he presented himself to present for you your stolen estate and your stolen rights that have been breached and institutionalized as government, the breaches. That's what the Democratic Party was and is. It doesn't mean that people that are members of the Republican Party haven't been doing the same thing, but most of our people don't know that the Democratic Party is the Ku Klux Klan Party. But yet they're always arguing about what the Ku Klux Klan done to them. They don't even study basics. And that's not even a mystery. Do you comprehend? And so, if these things aren't challenged and brought to the attention of the people, they operate on the assumed hypothecated jurisdictions that have been commonly in operation, and we keep suffering the consequences. You know, so I yield the floor and go ahead and present.
I'm reading a brief on oaths of office.
Yes.
And an oath is a declaration made according to law before a competent tribunal or officer to tell the truth, or is the act of one who, when lawfully required to tell the truth, takes God to witness that what he says is true. It is a religious act by which the party invokes God not only to witness the truth and sincerity of his promise, but also avenge his imposture or violated faith. Number one, it says, it is proper to distinguish two things in oaths. One, the invocation by which the God of truth, who knows all things, is taken to witness. Two, the implication by which he is asked as a just and all-powerful being to punish perjury. The Act of Congress, June the 1st, 1789, 1, Stories L.U.S. Page 1 regulates the time and manner of administering certain oaths. The oath hereby required to be taken shall cause a record or certificate thereof to be made in the same manner as by the law of the all cap states, he or they shall be directed to record or certify the oath of office. The spirit of an oath obliges and sanctions a limitation of powers and manifests a binding contract between two or more parties. The one who obliges is presenting an offer, consideration, and the one who is obliged is accepting the offer and agrees to honor the consideration that has been presented to him or her in good faith. This binding contract makes law because contracts make law, and all law is contracts, constituting a debt or duty owed. All oaths or contracts must be carried out in clean hands, and if a breach occur, it makes the one who breaches liable for execution for whatever was stipulated in the contract. Title 28, 1746, United States Code, and UCC 3-307. So we're talking about people taken oaths in governmental positions, oaths of office. That oath then becomes the bond. They give their word. They do it before the people. They do it before the Creator, and then that creates the bond. So that's why public officials have identity bonds. So when they breach that oath of office, that's when you go after their bonds and place liens and suits against their bonds, like Grant said, for remedy.
Now, the point of it is that whenever the administrators, see, not when a court opens up, when the administrators open a court session, the oaths are to be read from the door. And when you're dealing with such persons, you're supposed to have a copy of it any damn way. And when you deal with anyone, I don't care who it is, what club they belong to, what organization they belong to, what community, civic crap they're talking about, what marching organization, what praying organization, when they're talking about people's rights, that is fundamental. When there's any legal matter whatsoever, you're supposed to have a standard, because it is standardized, oath of public office that you're supposed to be cognizant of. And before you start getting into anything about jurisdictions that breach upon your rights and liberties, that person who's making judgment is supposed to first state for the record his or her name in full, his or her office in full, their delegation of authority order, their oath of office, then present the matter and the accuser, and then notify you and make sure all those things are in your possession. Now we're dealing with your status, and then the jurisdiction, subject matter, then territorial jurisdiction, whether they had even authority to even be talking to you. Then the proceedings begin. That's the beginning before due process. And whatever claim before the court, yeah, they didn't tell you anything. It's written a sworn affidavit that's attached to the so-called summons with Freddie Johnson's name on it. See, where's Freddie Johnson? Oh, yeah, I know he's a woman. And you're supposed to see who you be, and they ain't supposed to say nothing. And if they got something to say, come up to the mic, and it's already, you don't get discovery later. You already discovered what they ain't no Columbus thing. Stuff's all here. Oh no, we gonna move with this stuff. We gonna eliminate this stuff, right? Because if we gonna move with this stuff, we call my boys. Majority of my own national peers, ain't nothing else supposed to be going on. I want $9.95. Round it off to $20. Jury. And if we ain't talking about Article 1, Section 10, you ain't talking about no dollars. So immediately they talk about Federal Reserve notes, the venue is unconstitutional. And the claim is too. So now you're talking trust law, right? Because now they're immediately talking the World Global Trust that's run by the Pope. So now you talk about routing numbers and stuff. So they're supposed to inform you, aren't they? That's not what they're talking about. Oh, well, let's get that straight too. Go ahead.
Islam. I just want to get some clarification. In my studies, I noticed that in just trying to put these players in position together within the court and understand the movement, and I came across some information that stated that all officers of the court are directors, collectors, or representatives of the Inquisition Revenue Service, Federal Civil Rules 81F, and that deals with enforcing or reviewing a compensation order. Of course. Under the Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act.
Now let's go ahead and analyze that.
Yes, let's do that.
Now it's clearly unconstitutional, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's clearly not representing a public officer. They're lobbyists and representatives for a private corporate entity construct and owners without telling you that.
So that
But
is a
presenting
collection
yourself as if you're dealing with a venue of fair representation and presentment, which is not, which on its face is not only a fraud, it's a misrepresentation, it's assumed, established, confessed judgment already, and they're really collectors for a debt that ain't confirmed, but it's assumed confirmed.
Correct.
Go ahead.
And also, something kind of really bothered me when I found this information, and I'm not sure if it's saying like well, let me just read it. It says the United States Supreme Court, in all its ultimate wisdom, gave full immunity against both civil and criminal prosecution for perjury to judges, attorneys, court reporters, stenographers, law enforcement officers, and expert witnesses who testified before the state. And this is Briscoe versus LaHue.
Now, isn't that the Act of Congress 1871?
Right, and it's
Isn't that a breach?
exactly.
Of course it is, and it's an obvious breach, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And an admission, isn't it? An admission that they're not lawful courts.
Absolutely.
They in fact aren't courts.
Correct.
They're human trafficking venues. And the people are the capital.
Right. Because in defining the position, I was, basically I started looking at this a little bit deeper when there's a show out on Netflix, and it deals with what happened to the Asian brothers back in New York. And the show is called When They See Us. One of the things at first your emotions get involved, and then you get a little angel.
Start looking at facts.
Right, name Grand Sheets and get your emotions in check. So you start getting your emotions in check as you're looking at the whole entire thing. Then you start looking at the actors and how they're actually portraying the movements of the tribunal facilities.
Yes.
And how they're taking the rights of the person to be able to bond it for a so-called compensation of a crime that's not fully, there's no evidence of a crime committed.
It never was.
Exactly.
Not by them.
Not by
They
them.
put in lipstick on a pig and tell them you to go to the prom
Right.
with pig.
So in watching that, it just helped me to see how these tribunals operate in their movement, and each person is playing
Let's back off.
it's like a dance.
Let's back off. Let's back off.
Okay.
And this is for those who are listening. And this is what we want to do. And this is protocol. We want to stop saying venues. This is how the men and women, owners, beneficiaries, and operators of those venues misrepresented as courts are doing this, that, or the other. We've got to stop saying the court did this, or the city did this, or any entity. Stop giving entity personage quality. We've got to remove that, because that's one of the semantic tricks that the barristers set up that keeps injuring us. So back up and make a statement here.
Well, like
The administrators.
the administrators, you're correct.
Yeah.
The administrators, the Black Growth Ware, the administrator, is the person who will listen to the attorney who is acting as a mediator
For the state,
for the state.
which already is a violation.
Right.
Article of Amendment 13, the nobility clause, they're already in violation. As soon as they give them credibility to even be speaking in that venue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So
right.
you have the bench, which is seen as an altar for your confession.
And it confess judgment
Confess
that's
judgment.
already set before you walk in there. They're just
Absolutely.
collecting on you. They're collectors on you, arbitrary collectors. Not presenting themselves as arbitrary collectors. Continue.
Right, and during a part of the scene, the mediator, aka attorney, said the will has already been spilled. It has already been spent, which means that the amount of surety, the calculation that they're looking for, has already been decided.
Exactly.
I just thought that was interesting to see.
In other words, it's confessed. Now, again, confessed judgment, already predetermined, and they put you through the motion of appearing that you're having due process when that indeed is not taking place and never has been taking place since 1871. And we've been groomed to it. And think that the fact that we go to these venues and they're going through this appearance process, that it is due process, and it is absolutely not. But actually the action is to put on the record a confessed judgment, and you have not been told that as soon as you walk among them, the judgment is already assumed to be confessed. And this is back to where your protocols of operations and your affidavits set forth before you even enter those venues. And if it's imposed upon you, it is only a special appearance to clear up the matter in relationship to that estate. And the assumed hypothecated judgment that's already in place to be assumed and gone unrebutted. Just even what you did claiming the estate. Even though that shouldn't be necessary, but that's what that effect is. Go ahead, bro.
And so when we're talking about rights, we look at the reservation of rights in Amendment 10, and it says, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
Now, stop right there. Phrase, not delegated. Therefore, if they're operating lawfully, there must be a certification of delegated authority. And if it doesn't exist, they don't have it. And there's no condition by which they can claim it. Because it only resides, as they may say, with you. Which is why they start making statements like, you want to waive your rights and sandwiches or something? And he said, well, I was thinking about it. No, you don't even, there's no such thing as you waiving your rights. Why? Because they already have a confessed judgment. Did you know that? Well, now you do. and don't assume otherwise. And this is back to the other issue, Tamara. Once you start looking at these things and look at what Noble said, and look at certain statements that people claim to be governors and grand chiefs, what they have been actually supporting, this is why they don't want people to learn civics. Because not only you will recognize that the European have been treasonous against you in the Constitution, so has many of these grand governors and grand chiefs and chiefesses of the Moorish Science Temple, who you thought were supporting the prophet, were actually traitors. And that's not an opinion. That's provable. This is why as soon as you start seeing them talk against civics, they're telling you exactly who they are. Not because Tarik guys said so, because you should know that. And then you also begin to recognize why we have economic and political problems that exist today that should have been resolved decades ago. And you also recognize why the prophet warned and told people that the day will come that people will come to this movement with their eyes open. You're demonstrating the prophet's prophecy. I just want to remind you of that. However, when you see that people don't comprehend that, it is your duty to clear that up, even while we're working on ourselves to clear up our misconceptions. And be careful what you say, because one of the things that we must do, and it must become part of your protocol, is remove the personage nature that has been presented in legal argument relative to the corporate entities, whether the states, cities, or the federal. Matters not. Get out of the trained animal level concept of the city of Philadelphia sent me this, or the city of Wilmington disallows me, or the city of anything, or the IRS sent me. None of these entities ever done. They're all dead. They're corpse. They're corporations. They're corpses. Look for the living men or women that are operating behind the mask of the LLCs to cause you injury, and name them at all times. And never make statements saying the corporate entity. Always say the male, and if you can find the names, Joe Blasky Dinsdorf, who alleges to be an officer for the corporate operations of the municipality operating on the land designated corporately as Wilmington. Wording, failing to do so loses you. And I know we've got to get used to stop abbreviating. But if we stop abbreviating means to dilute. They've been getting over. So when you get to the foundation of things, we must train ourselves, because we've been mistrained through education for animals, to forget the erudite level of comprehension for human interchange. And it's rough because we've been trained from childhood. But we must recognize that it's dangerous. And a lot of frustration and economic injury that continues is because we keep allowing people to convince us to abbreviate. No and don't. And I know it's wordy, but guess what happens? As soon as you abbreviate, you've been cheated. No different than we'll say PA instead of Pennsylvania State Commonwealth. Well, we ain't got to say all that, just put PA on there. And guess what that is not? It has nothing to do with the Republic order of government. It has to do with private corporation operations in the middle of the ocean under admiralty, maritime, piracy, feudal law operations, and they put that there for that purpose. It's not an abbreviation. Well, it is, but not the way you think it is. It is. The Constitution was abbreviated, altered, modified, converted, and your rights go with it. And I know people think that that's, being cut. That is exactly what's taking place. So with all of our conversation, that's what we want to keep checking with each other on that. Always look for the living man or woman to talk to. Never pursue or assume or allow someone to assume that you're talking to their private entity that can never speak. You can never challenge it. It's like, say, for instance, they may send someone, man or woman, operating for one of the corporate entities, may send to you through the United States mail a summons on a so-called traffic violation with some photo that they took at an intersection of your car going around the corner.
Right.
And they say you have a fine.
Right.
They say bring the camera in court so I can challenge the accuser. Because the camera can't damn talk.
Right.
Court, the case is done. When you understand that concept, and we're telling the truth, when you understand that concept constitutionally, it is simple, but yet, do you know how hard it is to get that concept across to people who don't understand constitutional principles? I want to defend my rights, but this stuff is so deep. You sit that camera up there and start talking to the camera and say, camera, can you testify for the record at what time you took the picture and whether or not someone altered the colors in that picture of that light that was there on 5th and Ward Street? And wait for the camera, and then somebody else trying to talk, talk to that the accuser speak. You can swear in too. We're waiting. No accuser, no case.
Yeah.
See how simple that is? And do you know how many people will try to make you think that that's complex? And if you can keep that concept in mind, the same thing goes when they say, well, the state of Pennsylvania sent you a tax bill and you didn't pay it. Two lie statements. You can't pay it, and the state of Pennsylvania can't do what? It's a court. It's dead. What man or woman in this room, because it ain't a court, that's trying to make a claim against my state? Because not only that, since I'm here, I don't have to sworn affidavit with your signature. What's your name? It's Freedom. Well, I don't know you. Plus you're pale. So you're clearly not American. You have no territorial jurisdiction, so there must be some international law claim that you have registered with your consulate that has been entered into this venue that's established under constitutional law, Article 3. Because all supreme law and jurisdictional powers vested in one Supreme Court. I'm waiting. And once you start getting this clear in your mind, your protocols will be, you don't need someone to speak, you understand protocol. We use some protocols written out, just there it is. However, if you need to break down, just use that common sense, and the average being, even a high schooler, can make a list of fundamental response protocols. As an example, this is the protocol, right? As an example, as a note, right? So when the administrator or the administrative clerk claiming to be a judge in a venue that they claim to be a court forces a lawyer, member of the bar upon you, or a public defender, right, upon you, and claims them to be your counsel, right? This is what they do commonly, right? And it's against your will, you must, quote unquote, object. I object. Right? Now failure to object, right? Or failure to waive your objection, you must protest. And failure to waive your objection or your protest by them on your behalf must be objected. You know, like they'll say to you, well, I'll put in, these administrators do that, I'll put in a guilty plea for you, or you waive, well, yeah, you can't do that for me. Or you're the referee, don't be punching me. We need you in the room. You know, I ain't supposed to be ducking the ref. You know, when you boxing, you trying to get down, he punching you in the back of the head, he need with the sneaking stuff. Because that's what they do. And the people don't recognize it because they don't know fundamental civics. Fundamental civic instruction cannot be emphasized enough among our people. If the fundamental protocols, which are obvious, are promoted and taught, a child can get this. Therefore, it is inexcusable and it is cruel that adults are getting violated every day in private human trafficking venues, which are for the benefit of private foreign unregistered corporations by members of the Bar Association who are unregistered foreign agents in violation of the nobility clause of the Constitution for the United States, to which these people take an oath. And no one charges them. And then we look for due process. I don't think it's happening. Then they make confess judgment, no jury ain't seen none of your own people. Then you got some foreign Europeans talking about the Americans. No, y'all ain't. No, we just got like the blood. No, let's start that shit.
And Europeans are not American.
Hey, sooner you get that through your head, the sooner common sense starts sinking in. And you recognize institutionalized servitude and unum sanctum operations under the guise of government. Not under government, under the guise of government. Are we clear?
Clear.
And I know y'all got some interjections. Go ahead, sis.
As well. If they, as far as if they misrepresent you and then you penalty on go as far as counterjecting them and holding power.
Make something very clear. Back up. Hey, who's they? What you want to do is start moving away from lightweight statements and start saying, if the Europeans or other representatives who are claiming to be judges or lawyers or attorneys or representatives or tax collectors or employees of the corporate municipal states, etc., says such and such and such, that's how you want to start talking. And in doing so, you will change your question to a conscious statement and answer it yourself. I'm showing you how connotative linguistics actually buries people. And many questions that you ask, you would answer them yourself if you would take them out of the abbreviated structure. So, and that, again, it is not only linguistic correction that I'm making. I want you to look at that if you start consciously removing the personage from the corporate entity construct and start naming people who claim authority, before you finish, you will have answered your question. Back up and start again. In other words, you know, like you're in a race, and they go, oh, no, you know, there's somebody started early. No, wait a minute. No, let's get back to the line. And let's go again. Pow! Go ahead. No, because the deal is requiring you to think. And the thinking is to remember, and it's not innocent, that the personage principle given to the corporate state entities in 1868 has served its purpose very well for them, to our injury. And our concepts of communicating have been rooted in that personage concept, And even though we know it after being told, our language, we keep practicing it, not knowing at that time it's confessed judgment. No, and it has to be brought to your attention at all times, because logically, you don't want to come out of your house thinking that you got to be on guard all the time. Who wants to come out of the house every morning with armor on and shit? Well, guess what? You got to. You're under European colonial occupation. Get over it. It's hard, it's unfair, it's immoral, it's unethical, but that is the life course for all Asiatics of African descent and Aboriginal people, not just in North America, but across the globe. Like that sister said, but in recent statement really pressured her when she said everywhere the European goes, he steals people's lands and commits genocide, and everybody was pissed off at her for telling the truth. Well, guess what happens when you forget that? You start talking in connotative linguistics that they have prepared for you, even when you're trying to preserve your rights and not recognizing that you're walking into a confessed judgment because you haven't examined what you have said. Because you assume it to mean one thing when it means another. Now, I'm just reminding that, I don't expect you to straighten it up immediately, but reconsider your questions. And always take personage off the entity. And always, when you're thinking in controversy, a living being that you're speaking of or to, at the point that you forget that, you've already lost from a lawful possession. Are we clear? And you've lost standing. Be aware of that. Restructure your question. Yes, it's causing you to think. And we're patient, because we're here at the House of Read. That's why we call it the House of Read or Awakening Minds. Serious. Read, because even when we think that we're conscious. A lot of times I'm talking, me and Dr. Naila will be riding sometimes and she gets in her thing. No, because when she be talking, when she just lets it loose, or she be dropping jewels, but it's just her nature. And a lot of times, and I like talking with Dr. G because, it keeps me on my toes, because we're all constantly growing. And a lot of times, she's so modest about herself a lot of times, she be really hitting it, damn. You don't enter because you don't want to stop the flow, but a lot of times you be talking and she be hitting it and you be, man, go ahead, girl. But you don't say it, but she be dropping it. And we always grow. We always grow. And when people are just sincere, when they're just being sincere, that's when the real comes out. That's when the real comes out. Don't ever suppress that. If the spirit or your nature is speaking, don't start abbreviating it. And if somebody don't want to hear it, fine. You don't like that song, turn the channel. But guess what? You want this? How's it reawakening minds? At least it's what it is. We're here seeking truth. We're not condemning people for what they believe. No. We're not knocking people for their beliefs, because we've all been subject to that. But we're here to promote the seeking of truth. And when truth arises, we embrace her. You give me a kiss. Oh, got that. Wait, man. You might not want to hear, but come on, girl. You got this. And that's what the House of Reawakening Minds really is all about. It's about liberation. And it's about forgiving. But it's not being a carpet for somebody. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And don't let people get over on you, because we are re-awakening. We thought we was awake. We got to do a lot of reading around here. So let's rethink what you said and restructure your question. And the fact that you're pausing to think is indicator that you're beginning to recognize our flaws. So you don't have to ask me, you're asking you. That's what I'm saying to you. So I'm saying to you, have confidence in your thoughts. really have confidence in yourself. Don't believe outside of you, believe you. But change your language and you will answer. All you have to do is open your mouth and your mother cosmic will speak for you. But it must be sincere. Remove the personage from entities that have been presented to you before the living people who have been administering them, and half of the confusion is over. If you keep that in mind, and I don't want to beat your ears with it, but restructure your question confidently.
Well, a situation happened where security guards didn't want to take the Marsh identification, our identification nationality card, and they said it's not a form of identification and wanted to speak to the manager. And I just want to know how to go in legal standing with the appropriate lean process of doing that, even with trying to talk to managers and go forward that.
So when you run into a situation like that, so I'm going to take your statement. Security guards, that's a designated position. It's not some man or some woman. Did you know their names?
They wouldn't say their names.
Oh, well, why would they not say their names? Because they're hiding behind the corporate entity. Exactly what I'm saying to you. That's number one. Number two, they're admitting that they're not constitutional officers, so they had no authority to make that decision one way or another. Number three, the United States Corporation Company and all corporate states are required by law, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, to maintain a Republican form of government. But they're operating on a democratic platform of a democracy of mob rule. And in violation of Article 3, Section 2, the judicial powers, and they made a judgment in violation of diversity. Do you know that that's discrimination? And that is an act of color on his face, and the reason they didn't give you a name, because you immediately had grounds for suit. Not, and furthermore, in the argument, you already have grounds for suit. And guess what? Since, write this down, since fraud has no statute of limitations, do some research, go back and get their names, and file a claim against their surety bonds. That's protocol. It ain't over. And ain't no fat lady singing either. When she finishes, then you get the mic. Now, that's protocol. Write that down. Don't forget it. And if you run into that again, don't argue with them. Go back and do some background research. As a matter of fact, you can write a formal letter to whatever corporate operations that these people are employed by, commanding their names and the bond carrier. And if they refuse, and they've made a public judgment against you, now the administrator of them is now liable. Because failure to make public the surety bond is no different, and keep this in mind, this is obligation, and keep this in mind, this is in harmony with what we was talking about, and share with us, if not tonight, some other time, if you want to just even take some time, because that's very important. When they fail to make public the surety bond, that is actually a felony. Did you know that? Well, now you know. That's actually, yes, it's a felony. If anyone who's operating on any level as an alleged public officer, man or woman, and fail to make public their surety bond, and particularly on request, the denial itself is a felony.
Regardless if it's given in paper form or licensed.
Let's back up, and so let's put this in perspective for the average being.
Right.
And I think this will answer the question as others hearing you will receive it, knowing that they have limited knowledge.
Right.
You know, like if you're running a big restaurant or a big trucking company and you're moving goods on a public highway on a commercial venue, and for the safety of the people, some inspectors of post of duties stops you and says, do you have license and insurance?
Mm-hmm.
What is the occurrence if you don't produce it and you're doing in a commercial venue? They start seizures, don't they? Well, the surety equity bond it is required to be held by any person claiming to be a public officer that even speaks about your rights or lack thereof. That's like asking them for their license and insurance, and they don't produce it, but yet they're doing an injury to you. Look at it that way, and that answers your question. When you don't look at it that way, you don't get it. And you know that the average person doesn't get it because they don't look at the surety bond and the delegated authority as license and insurance. The delegation of authority order as per Article 3 and as Amendment 10 is the same as the license for commercial operation. The surety bond and equity bond is the insurance that must be put in place that when the tort takes place, the liability already exists. It's not some condition of, well, you got to go through some damn litigation. You go ahead and make that bond, make that claim on their bond. Somebody riding past and hit your bumper and keep on going, you say, well, I got to ask for consideration, and if they would like to talk to me about, you get their tag number and make a claim against their bond. Start tracing whatever their insurance companies put it out there, and guess what? The liability exists. And this is how you got to start not thinking, but knowing that all persons, men and women, claiming to be any kind of officer, as soon as they claim to be an officer, they're constitutionally bound. You don't have to see anything. It already exists. And as soon as they violate you, lien, practicality, get organized, and so you can do it as a common rule of protocol, not as a single unit, because they're corrupt, they violate process. And they've been getting away with it because the administrators are corrupt members of the Bar Association. They're not lawful judges. They're actually private foreign officers of private foreign corporate entities pretending and posing and guising as government, which they are not and never were. And so the same way you learn about nationality of you can learn about nationality of them. This is why some grand governors of the Moorish Science Temple were mad when we activated the existing Article 3 Consular Court to support the nationality cards, which are diversity instruments, and they act like we made something up. See how we caught them? It ain't just Europeans that are your enemies.
I have a question on the line.
Go ahead.
How do you attack their surety bond?
You make a claim, you make a written claim, and it must be clear. And you must make, like say for instance, once you understand what your rights are and what is stated relative to delegated authority of any person in government, it becomes obvious. And like say for instance, if one of these Europeans, you're going down the street in your conveyance, in your car, truck, carriage, whatever you want to call it, automobile, and you're not breaching anyone, you're not being careless, you're being responsible, and they profile you because, as an example, you got dark windows or something like that, anything, and they put on these emergency lights and stop you. As soon as they stop you, that's an arrest. That they stopped you, that act is an arrest. Because they've interfered with your liberties. They don't have to write you a ticket. The ticket is another violation. That's a whole other area. It's called a foreign bill of exchange. Write this down. A ticket is a foreign bill of exchange. That itself is a fraud. The existence of it is a fraud. So we ain't even getting there yet. Unless you committed an obvious crime and they're a first party witness and got no business turning them damn lights on that indicated an emergency just took place. You know that, right? And so the protocols go along with that. In other words, this is back to protocols.
Right.
Now, so when they're telling you, like say for instance, you have your Morse identification card, they're trying to tell you that license is identification, they just lied to you again. And then when they denied you, that's a violation of international law. And that's also denationalization, a violation of even the agreement with the Special Committee of 24 for decolonization in 1960. Special Committee of 24 on decolonization, that is the decolonization of colonial governments, which are all colored, which meaning that they're not even, not that they were lawful in the first place, but this is agreements for decolonization. That's what's been taking place. This is again why, like as an example, in Philadelphia area, Shepherd-Exon area, after they bombed MOVE, they immediately put out a protocol for the people called Negro, Black, and Colored, etc., to declare their Moorish nationality free from the chambers of Philadelphia, because that's where they took it. They took it from there. And if anybody's seen that non-pro-tonque document, that's what that's really all about. Meaning that they already knew that they were in violation of law. For when they bombed MOVE in Philadelphia, for them not agreeing to the Christian black codes and sending their children under the Christian black codes to the European schools under John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates to dumb them down for animal training, they were accused of being out of order. And they literally murdered the people and bombed them from the air, just like they did in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and people never paid attention to that. That was a violation of international law, and many MOVE members are still in prison, and many were murdered, and no one argues from that perspective. They keep arguing racism and color games, which is not the issue. And this is where concepts must be clear. Are we clear?
Clear.
And we'll go into that non-pro-tonque document in the future. From the chambers of Philadelphia. Go ahead, good brother.
Future, like next time.
Yeah, well, remind me, and we'll do that, because we really need to do that. And I'm going to make copies for you and give it to you so everybody have copies of it, and these things need to be put in perspective. And this is back to sometimes people talk about, like, they don't even observe their own processes. No, their processes or their own, what you call process is unum sanctum, which means there is no process.
Overthrow.
It's arbitrary mob rule. That's what a democracy is. And this is why, when we share with people, even on the flash drive, the distinction, or even in reversion, so people's concepts be clear, the distinction in the military manuals means they are trained to the distinction between the republic, as stated by the Constitution, and the democracy order of mobocracy that they're operating under. And the sooner we get this in our minds, of what it is or is not, the sooner people will get their concepts together. Are we clear?
Clear.
And I think a lot of times, a lot of our questions that are rooted in the problems that we have, these fundamentals are not taken in consideration that already answer your questions. Consciousness. Go ahead. And so therefore, reawakening is a conscious medicine that we take constantly, particularly when we come through them doors. Go ahead, brother.
I get,
Go ahead. Go ahead, you're holding up the mic. Go ahead.
It says, given the private secret trust of the private central banks are presented to the false presumption when a man or woman makes clear their live-born record and claim over their own name, body, mind, and soul, any trust based as on such false presumptions cease to have any property. Any administrator or executor that refuses to immediately dissolve a custody trust upon a person's establishment status incompetency is guilty of fraud and fundamental breach of their fiduciary duties, requiring the immediate removal from office. So
two things I want to say to you. Now, and this is for the people. Now, as you read that, your hesitancy in reading it, for someone listening, they may not get it.
Right.
When these concepts are with you, get them clear where you can flow with the information. I understand what it is, but I guarantee that half the people listening didn't get it because you stammered. And that's not a criticism.
I wanted to break it down. That's
not a criticism. It's not a criticism. It is analysis that we need to overcome. Get it true in your heart, the concept of what you're reading, so it flows. And the people who are hearing it really get it. What are you dealing with? You're dealing with nationalization, which is a claim of right of standing, and estate. You're dealing with the rule of descendability, and you're dealing with the rule of trust law, and the fact that that's in operation at all time. And what that is a fiduciary statement against a fiduciary or FOFR who operates in breach. And the removal from office, which would be caveat emptor, as demonstrated by the prophet. Now, and Act 1 in the additional bylaws, which is why Durali did that. But also, for us having a clear comprehension that that's what you're talking about. You're talking about trust law. And you're talking about a being, man or woman, declaring their nationality, which is the right of heritability and estate in propria persona. When those statements are made, if that is not comprehended, that's where you're coming from, and they're explaining the relationship of breach of a fiduciary or FOFR. Now that's what, for those who are listening, that's what he's really talking about. And back to us, we must be clear about what we're talking about so that when we're sharing this information that it flows. Because when you stammer with it or when you pause with it, it breaks up the comprehension thought process. And people will have to think hard to try to hear, where you're coming from. And you're absolutely correct.
Is that the nationality part? The born record?
Well, that's the first, that's what that presents to the world. Not represent, what it presents. The reclamation of estate. But I do recognize, and I know you do too, that many of the people don't recognize what that really presents to them and the world. Even with the first paragraph that you read from the divine warning for the nations, which is a clear diversity statement. And yet they allow people who are governors and Grand Chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple speak against that principle of Amendment 9, Amendment 10, and Article 6 and Article 3 of that Constitution, that they are fiduciarily obligated to enforce and have not been challenged or unseated.
Come on. Clear.
Now, and the people who don't know basic civics get caught in the gray area of trying to figure this stuff out when it's basic. It really is basic. You know, and it's an attack on the people. Not on Taji guy for saying this, because they attack me all the time. I don't care. Y'all got alligators here. You know, really. But the deal is when people don't recognize that they're not attacking Jawali or me, they're attacking you.
Clear.
Once you understand what nationality birthright already is in its nature, the only reason why these people are in power is because our lack of consciousness and often thinking or assuming that we're awake. We need to be slapped again and reawakened. No, really, we don't get it. Now, appreciatively, you know, this is for yourself, G, and for you, Isaiah, and for you, Tamara. Tamara. Really?
You got it.
You know, and the work that you all are doing that a lot of people don't see. You know, because a lot of times they see people like me or someone talking and don't know that people in the background that are really making things work.
Clear.
The fact that you all are getting it and are transferring it to the younger generations cleanly without these corrupt, and I just got to tell like it is, grand chiefs who've been standing in the way for generations, in the way who've been stopping deliberately civic instruction, that you all will be fixing it for the next generation. I want to say I applaud you.
Thank you. That's long.
I really do, and give y'all a hand. Because they always, you know, when we clap in the country, and different venues, people always clapping for us, we just talking trash. You know, we're just like messengers and stuff, channels. However, it is the people that really get the concept and start doing the work. That's what's going to save these next generations. And that's the missionary work. That's the real missionary work. Truthfully. You know, not, you know, egos that people present and this imagery crap that they present is the liberation of the people. It is the reason and the purpose that we do what we do. And that principle is noble and it must remain noble. You know, and it's up to you all to keep it clean. And when people who have this knowledge get dirty, move them out the way and keep it moving. Are we clear? And once they breach, they're no longer worthy. Because the birthright belongs to the people at all times.
Absolutely.
Keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
All right, who got the mic?
Give it back.
Go ahead. Oh, all right. Go ahead.
My question, Islam. My question.
Islam. Go ahead.
The nations are no longer purchasing T-bonds, treasury bonds.
Yeah.
If that is
Back up. Because now, and again, I know it seems like a little unfair. Now listen. The nations of the earth are no longer purchasing United States Corporation Treasury bonds. See, T-bonds, see, don't make it, see, because we've got to name, we've got to be specific. We've got to focus on being, because as soon as you leave the entity operators out, you remove their liability.
Absolutely.
Just, now back up and stay again.
The various nations of the earth are no longer purchasing the U.S. corporation's treasury bonds.
Yes, go ahead.
These events continue to occur, which you stated at one point results in a government shutdown.
That's what that's really all about, and been all about.
That continues to occur. What does that look like for Northwestern Mexico and other nations?
And this is what's happening all around the world. It's a command in nature of operations for the common nationals and citizens around the world to recognize their obligation to sovereign right themselves being thrown back in their laps. And we have not been doing those things necessary to make ourselves better nationals and better citizens. We have not been practicing those principles, and we're still looking for corrupt leaders and misrepresenters to act right when they're not going to, when they're being dismantled. Don't look for the corruptors to do right, look for them to step back. But look for you to take your places among the affairs of men. Now you understand what Raleigh says, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America. Right? Then look at this. Come and link yourselves back with the families of nations. That's international law enforcement. Thus, be cognizant of your affairs. That's why you have the National Association of Moorish Affairs. That's what that really means. It means Moors taking their places among the affairs of men. It takes qualification that's not really hard. It takes fundamental studies and application of nationality principles that we have been negligent. In other words, we've been trusting others with the duties and responsibilities of enforcing constitutional principles, and they've actually used that power against us. And we've gotten lax in our consciousness and our self-responsibility to act on birthright principles. And we're still looking for outsiders to exercise powers that they breached. When you, me, we're talking plural, were presented with the consciousness and the instrumentality, which is your nationality and birthrights, you were given a card of nationality identification, which indicate that we are now officially starting to take responsibility of self-government. And the platform, which is the Moorish Divine National Movement, in its natural form and honor and noble form, is to be exercised. That's called constitutional enforcement. In doing so, these people thank you for stepping out of the way. So while they're stepping down or being torn down because of their corruption, we're supposed to be studying, because we're supposed to have been studying and activating. It's like a seesaw. You know, like when the little children got on a seesaw. You know, when they go up, you were down. But when they go down, you're supposed to be up. What point seesaw don't go like that. Seesaw goes like that. And what happens is we still are mentally trying to stay in the down position. When they're coming down, we're looking for them to be in the up position to what? Run our estate? They breached over and over again. The nations of the world are not buying their T-bonds because we're indicating that we're waking up, and it makes all instrumentality that they may have in their treasuries dead paper.
That's being president for real.
Right.
You know, and so these are the things that are not really being discussed in what you call the public mainstream media, because they want the people to think that they have no power. You do. Do you understand what nationality and birthright is? That when we're talking plural, not just you. We're talking about all of us.
Yeah.
So now the momentum is on. But all across the world, that's called nationalization. People are being forced to examine what it really means, not to assume what they thought it means. It means much more than what they thought. The more you look at this, you begin to understand national and divine movement. What movement actually means. And divine law don't mean religion. the way people have been taking it. You're dealing with Hermetic principles, maxims, and axioms. Keep that in mind and write those down so you can do research in the background. Maxims, axioms, and Hermetic law. And I want to remind you all this. I want to remind you all this. Whenever people are talking religion, at all, and never bring up cosmology and astrology, they're not talking religion.
That's right.
Whenever they're talking religion to the people and don't bring up Hermetic principles, they're not teaching religion. Because all of your Kabbalistic and all your Gnostic principles come from Hermes Trismegistus. And when anyone is talking about, what we really need to do is get into ancient Kemet and Egypt and shit, and they don't talk Hermetic law, let me say this to you and never forget this. Never forget this. I'm going to write this down and never forget this. And this is a point of study, and also on your notes. Right? Y'all got this. And don't forget this at all. And this goes also for them sheiks, them grand sheiks, and them assistant grand sheiks, and them grand governors of the Moorish Science Temple of America have been cheating people forever with their selfish selves. It's not all of them, most of them. Right? When they're talking this, right? They're talking excuse me, let me make this very clear. And when they're talking ancient Egypt, right? Right? That's what it is. And they will call it this. They call it that. That's what it is. And when they talk about, ancient Egypt and you see the pyramids and stuff, and then you want to talk about Neter, Mother Nature. Yeah, right. Mother Nature. And they'll say what? Don't they?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when they talk about, see what you want to do, see, because there's more science and sandwiches and stuff, and what it is, and see, what they ain't into ancient Egypt and stuff. Capital dominion of the Moorish Empire. Right, hold on.
Oh, Moses.
This is that. Right. Right. They're one and the same. And if you never forget that, this is for all addicts. This is where the addicts have been cheating people. They haven't been telling the people that. And so when they talk about ancient Egypt and they're getting all deep with thought and all that other stuff, and then you bring up the Hermetic principles, the 7 principles, the Hermetic law, say, well, he ain't into that stuff because that's that Taji guy stuff. I'm Tajiites. That ain't, I'm just telling the truth and what's up. What they know and haven't been telling the people. And they've been playing the people and they've been getting away with it. But thankfully, Dr. Naila In the house of reawakening minds, that she made many sacrifices to maintain this, because it used to be packed. People are standing all against the wall. They couldn't. You know what I mean? Throwing finance all over the place. But it wasn't necessarily honorable. And when she had her spiritual epiphany, you know, she heard her ancient ones calling. Stop mining shit. And she stopped mining shit. Read her book and stuff. Really. And that's true. You know, and many people don't have that integrity and honor to give up that fiat and make that sacrifice.
Clear, amazing, clear.
Very few clean spirits. However, we are honored that there are a few.
Absolutely.
And the generations to come will benefit from that.
That's love.
Hermes and Taught are one. And in order to save you from the bullshit, and I don't take that back, because you ain't supposed to cuss and shit. The Prophet Nobrali gave you a key to save you from this BS. And he says, and I'll close after this, Allah and man are one. And the sooner you get that lesson through your mind and heart, the sooner you'll be on your way to reawakening mind. And man is mine. And with that, I'll say thank you all for coming out to the house of reawakening mind. Thank you in the background, Tamara, for doing the work that you do. You're really high appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you, G, for being Rosin, being beautiful, being workful, and helping the people, and being enthusiastic, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, Counselor and Judge Isaiah, for the work that you're doing. Thank you all for the work you're doing with other people. Thank you for the sacrifices you're making with communications, the ongoing work that you're doing, and can't thank you enough.
Likewise.
And for a lot of people, you know, as I try on, they say, you know, they'll try to play the celebrity thing with me, and I always resist that. My reward is you all. That's my reward. You know, and the beautiful thing about this, if I stop tomorrow, it's on. Because them bikes is not riding uphill, them bikes is going downhill, and they don't have brakes. You know. And for those of you who are listening, you know, the interesting thing about a lot of people, Europeans and Asiatics, when you start telling the truth, particularly a lot of their Masonic secrets that they've been raping the people with by hiding the truth, they attack. We expect that because, you know, it's like like in the Wizard of Oz, you know, somebody pulled the curtain, you know, and everybody's upset. And so they treat the truth like the truth is the enemy. They treat truth like truth is a lie. And there's very few people, and this is the truth, you know, that have the courage and the honor to maintain a venue like here in the territory that we call Delaware corporately, Wilmington, and where Dr. Naila, as a being spirit, maintain the integrity of sacrificing and maintaining a venue like this, the House of Reawakening Minds. And I say this, and I appeal to your good nature and to your justice. She supports you, support the House. Don't forget, Dr. Naila, not Jajiga, to keep this venue open. Support the House of Reawakening Minds. And for all those people, because we already know that we have a listening audience in China. We already know that. We know that we have a listening audience in Japan. We know that we have a listening audience in Honduras, in Boricua, as well as across the states. If people would even afford one note until we can get some of the venues cleared up, which we're trying to do, where people really have control of their estates. You know, support the house to keep this venue open, because while we're trying to unbury the people and digging up the dirt, you got people with titles throwing dirt back into the grave of ignorance. And that's a reality. That's not fiction.
Check.
You know, and you know, I'm grateful that my mother brought me here with some degree of integrity, even with my flaws. And I'm going to do what my mother sent me here to do. And I trust, oh yeah, y'all. And those brothers and sisters, you know, in the Bordy King community, that you want the Circle 7, here we go. Al Santo Quran, Templo Ciencia. You know, and Brother Isaiah and much of the staff have been working with him gratefully, and I'm just really just so impressed with the ongoing work that they're doing, are making things available in Moorish Latin for the Latino, because that's not an identity, it's a tag.
Absolutely.
Moors who are speaking Latin, which is also our language too. And keep in mind, there's no such thing as Spanish, it's Latin. The language is Latin, not the people. They're mortals. Here it goes. And this will be available too. All right? So, and this is the kind of work that is, you know, we're really honored with. When you see, and I know that you are, because I know you're ongoing with your studies, to see the youth coming up and getting this work done that should have been done by governors and sheiks generations ago. But we ain't mad at them. They did what they can do, you know, and they've been cheating people, giving people dry sandwiches, calling it subs. You know, they keep their subs. The prophet then sent them to us, and thank you all for your work.